Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another podcast. We're so excited to have you all listening in again today. And please like, subscribe, leave your reviews. We love hearing from y'all. We love reading them. And we also post them on all of our social media networks. And so today we have a really amazing guest. I want to say he's probably one of the first professional baseball players we've actually had on the podcast. But we're going to really get into his oilfield career. So today we have Jayme Sperring, and he is an innovative business leader who has demonstrated success in building companies, M&A, and global sales and marketing communications. Jayme spent the majority of his 16-year professional career with NOV, serving in various commercial leadership roles across multiple business lines to his current role as Executive VP of Business Development and Strategy at Varel Energy Solutions in Houston, Texas. He holds 2 degrees in business management and economics from Rice University, and he actually started his career as a pro baseball player. And I have to say, Jayme, it's pretty impressive that you even played at Rice and got 2 degrees, because being a college athlete myself, it's very difficult to keep up on your studies and play a sport, especially go into professional side of the sports world. So we're really excited to have you on and hear all about your journey.
Well, thanks, ladies. It's an honor to be with you guys. You guys are blazing a trail, and yeah, just happy to have the conversation for sure.
Thanks, Jamie. So I'm very curious about just your childhood and what it was like growing up. Your father is Rob Sperring, and he was a professional baseball player in the 70s who played, I believe, for the Cubs and the Astros. Obviously, in that professional world, there's 162 games a season, tons of practicing hours. I mean, your dad must have been that bleeding baseball, and I'm sure he was pushing that on towards his kids, because that's usually kind of, I think, parent mentality is, look at me, I also want you to follow in my footsteps. So what was life like growing up with a pro baseball player as a dad?
Yeah, I mean, of course, looking back in it now, it's much more profound and appreciative now as to what he did than when you're really growing up and you're in it, because he was just dad. All dad was, he had another job, but really all he did was, play baseball, coach baseball. Most of our life was around the sport. All of our weekends, all of our holidays. I think I missed my senior prom because of a baseball game. So, growing up, that was really what it was. And so when you're growing up as a child, you don't really appreciate the magnitude of that until you get older and really start appreciating it. So, but now it certainly was relatively intense. But, just like everything, perspective matters. So you look back on it and, just wouldn't have given it up for the world for all the things I learned from him.
That's awesome. So obviously you became a baseball player yourself afterwards, which meant you did follow in his footsteps. And that could have been from just, being involved in the sports throughout your childhood. Do you think deep down, looking back, you had other passions that maybe you would have made a career out of? Or was there any pressure on, I want to be a baseball player because my dad hopes that for me?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think any child you're a product of your upbringing. You're a product of what you know at that moment in time. So growing up, that's really all that I foresaw for myself, is if it wasn't baseball, it was some type of a sport. Grew up in a very competitive family. I have a younger brother in which, he was lucky enough to travel along that same path. And so, thinking about a different path for me other than sports was, I think, just secondary. I knew that I would be lucky enough and be successful enough to go further than, grade school. And because of my father and, kind of the insane work ethic that was bestowed upon us, I just figured that was the path. Now, as that, grew through college, through university, through, professional levels, I always found myself that, the sport really didn't define me, although, that kind of was my identity, to a lot of the public. And so I just knew that there was going to be life after baseball at some point. I just never really knew what that was going to be. But, I don't think I ever really fathomed a different path. It was really just, I would come home in high school and the mantra was, you need to get in the backyard in the batting cage and swing 1,000 times before you do homework. I mean, that was the priority in the Sperring house. And, when you say it out loud, it's probably not wonderful parenting, but, at the time it was kind of what we did. And to a large degree, I'm grateful for it because, sports provides, so many intangible and character building attributes that you, of course, take into further life. So.
Did you ever feel that when you were playing baseball and when you knew that your career obviously could take a route in professional baseball? When I was in school playing in college, a lot of my friends were on the baseball team, and I remember a lot of them would focus more on the sport and less on school. How did you balance your time? And did you think that I actually need to, do well in school, get my business degree because I'm at some point I'm not going to play baseball? And did you ever have a secondary path maybe you were looking at or looking forward to outside of, your baseball career?
Yeah, great question. Being so fortunate to go to Rice University and play throughout my undergrad career there, I had, that in itself, you're thrust into an environment where it's, a lot of stress on academia. So being able to, perform with good grades, the baseball and athletic teams there at Rice and in most, kind of larger universities, your ability to play is contingent upon you making good grades. I don't think I ever missed a class all through college because it was, it was a mandate. You would not play your sport if you missed class. You would not play your sport if you did not make, a high GPA. And so, that in itself, kind of built an understanding that, academics matter. Plus, my father, having gone through it, I think the statistic now is 1 in every 27,000 kids that go through high school will actually make it to a professional level. And so the odds of really building a career out of it are, almost impossible. So you have to be able to have, an academic foundation and an education and really a plan, after baseball. And so I knew that it would be short-lived, but, when you're in it, it's the passion, it's the dream. And, but, there was always some secondary reminders that I would have to be planning for something else. I had left Rice after my junior year going into the baseball draft. And so one of the negotiations with the professional team is they would, pay for the rest of my schooling, which gave you a really good motivation to make sure that you actually finished school and you did all the things to prepare yourself for a longer business career.
So your unfortunately your baseball career did end due to an injury. And we always say your identity when you play sports is really important because that's what everyone knows you for. It's all about your performance. I mean, you were even on baseball cards. So of course you were living your dream at that moment. Can you bring us back, if you can remember, those feelings of when you realized like your baseball career was over? What pulled you from probably like the darkest moment when you realize that dream is no longer there and that you're going to just have to completely change your life and focus on something else and move forward? Obviously, you've been extremely successful since then, but I'm sure in that moment, it probably felt like it was the end of the world. Can you tell us kind of what happened in that moment and how did you transition and like what kept you going to go pursue a career in to become an executive leader like you are today?
Yeah, it was hard. No question. You take the culmination of, what was maybe 24 years, 25 years of your life, dedicating yourself to a sport, and then it's over. But, when I was in professional athletics, and I don't really necessarily know why, but, you live in hotels, you're traveling across the country, playing the sport as a job. But, I was always the guy in the hotel rooms, either reading a book or, doing something that actually created and helped brain cells versus, kind of playing video games every day, which, a lot of my teammates did. And why, I don't know, but I always knew that there was going to be life after baseball, largely because had I never gotten hurt, I would have really, the odds of me making it to a long-term 10, 15-year Major League Baseball career was very, very low. And so even though I was good enough to be at where I was, I knew that it was going to transition at some point. But when it did, it is a heavy weight that, okay, oh my God, it's here. What do you do now? And my resume up until that point at 23, 24 years old, literally said professional athlete. Like that was it. I didn't even like wash cars growing up. So, so going into, okay, now I actually have to, get a real life and a real job, and what do I do? So, from there, it definitely was scary. I think the one confidence I had in myself is, as long as you know how to engage with people, and as long as you understand that, leadership is about impact and influence, and it's all about people, then, I could find myself being successful in something. And, fortuitously enough, and timing, is always everything. I met the right people, which got me the right conversations to enter the oil field. So from going from, a stadium of fans screaming at you in a positive manner, I'm in Kilgore, Texas on a coil tubing rig getting yelled at by, a company man. Needless to say, I didn't stay in the field for too long, but yeah, I mean, the life radically changed and you have to adapt. But I think I was more prepared for it than I would say most.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on what that was like, being a professional baseball player and getting into the oil field? I mean, you mentioned briefly that, yes, you got in the oil field, you started in the field, but, can you, for those who have never been in that position where you're literally moving from one completely different aspect of your life to this new thing, how did you make that process where you mentally could be prepared for what was ahead? Because it's very different than, what you were doing. And I've always said too, when you're in team sports, you're also given friends, because you're in this realm of people that you are working with every day, to now you're going in the outside world. And now actually you're going to have that team mindset still, but it's definitely a different dynamic than it is when you're part of an actual sports team. So can you kind of talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think any radical transition in life, whether it be with jobs, careers, family, friends, whatever it may be, it's going to be difficult unless you're able to kind of make that mindset shift to say, okay, something is going to change. This is going to be different. And my mindset is, I'm going to be curious. I'm going to have confidence in myself and my abilities. And for me, it really kind of went back to people. So much of my life was around teams, and I always had an innate ability to communicate with people. So as long as I had that, I went in and just became extremely curious. I just an insatiable thirst to learn, to the point where I annoyed the vast majority of people around me. They didn't keep me in the field that long and put me in the office in inside sales, because I just, was not meant for that world, because people needed to get their jobs done versus just have conversations. And so, but yeah, I think it's a mindset shift that some people struggle with, and all of us do whenever there's a massive change in our life. And so, but that mindset shift has to be around growth, around learning, around, just kind of leaning forward and being okay that things are going to be scary. Because, really growth, without pain, there is no growth. And so I think it's a mindset thing. It's hard for young people and young professionals to do that. But, I think that's what the secret sauce is.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing. And totally agree. So you get into the oil field, like you said, you become inside sales, you can move into the office, and then you have an incredible 8-year successful career at NOV. You climb up the ladder. Clearly your work ethic must have been excellent during those years, because looking at your LinkedIn, in those 8 years, you climbed up the ladder pretty fast, I would say, compared to other people. And you became director of global sales and marketing right before you left in 2012. And you actually mentioned to us how that decision came about. I believe they asked you to go close a deal or try to figure something out with the VPs of scientific drilling, who are one of the biggest customers for you guys. And you actually ended up leaving that meeting thinking, how are we going to work together? Like, it was such a great meeting. Sometimes you meet someone and you say, like, we're going to work together one day. And that was kind of how it came to be. And you decided to leave. How was that decision made? Because you saw this trajectory path of climbing up the ladder quickly at NOV. And obviously, I'm sure there was no ceiling for you at that point where you can maybe see yourself in a few years, keep climbing up even more if that was what you wanted. What made you decide to leave that career path and restart kind of all over again in a new company that was a lot smaller?
Yeah. NOV, what a dynamic and amazing company in the oil field. I think quite possibly probably the most strategic in oil field services, just how they've positioned themselves over the years. And, going through that company, I was put in positions that I was just not ready for, almost every one of them. And timing is everything. When I was, very, very early in my career at NOV, I was identified by, at the time, was the chief sales officer and one of the original founders of National Oil Well, a gentleman named Jerry Goshi, who today, is probably one of the most profound mentors, that I've ever had. And, he kind of took me under his wing. I was, his apprentice to a large degree for a number of years. And so you have a young 20-something, kid flying around the world, learning the dynamics and how a business works of a multi-billion-dollar market cap company, putting together processes and programs and leading people that are, far beyond my tenure, being in board meetings and, learning just the dynamics of business much, much faster than a lot of my peer group. And it was all just, fortuitous for me. But I because of my upbringing, I had a very, very strong work ethic to a large degree that, probably gave me plenty of scars throughout my career. But yeah, a great opportunity to be put into a lot of positions I was not ready for. But, you learn by being thrown into the deep end of the pool. We talked about that before the podcast started recording, and that was really the summary of my NOV career. Now, my engagement with the gentleman from Scientific Drilling, he was the chief operating officer at the time. Tough negotiation. All of a sudden we come out, arm in arm, as friends versus, enemies. And, I firmly believe that, life is too short to work with people who suck. And so I don't know if that was okay on the podcast, but
that's fine.
But
we agree.
Yeah, we do.
But I attest, whatever my career has been, successful or unsuccessful, to the mentors and the people that have been absolutely impactful and inspirational to me throughout my career. And this gentleman was one of them. And, in a very, very large company like NOV, it was very profound that no matter what impact I made, decisions I made, initiatives I put together, it was not going to move the needle. And NOV would continue to be a great company despite, Jayme Sperring. And so, Scientific was a rapidly growing, private, unique, company in oil field services. And that gentleman was kind of leading the charge. And so it was a wonderful opportunity to take a lot of things from scratch that didn't exist, go in there, really create a lot of impact and growth in the company. It was right around 2011 through 2014, which was, a great time in the oil field. And so a lot of just creating, new processes, growing the business very fast, implementing strategies, and the ability to go and execute those strategies. And it was just a wonderful time to, take all the things I learned and really go apply it. So, it was an easy decision to me. Of course, it was at the time the most pivotal decision I've ever made. Scary nonetheless, but it turned out to be a wonderful decision, and what a great company that was.
It really was pivotal in your career because you took 3.5 years at Scientific, which really gave you those development skills of working with a smaller company and bringing it up to scale, that you went on to then co-found Rubicon Oilfield International, which this was a very exciting venture for you, a high growth oilfield products company. And it was also backed by private equity, which is something that you really foster in and you do well and you thrive. And at the end of the day, this business actually became your baby. And you eventually had to walk away from it. So what's really interesting also that people might not know about you, Jayme, is you have a personal blog, which I happen to read. And in this blog, you talked about this very openly. And one of the things that you mentioned was you said, in quotes, I walked away from the business I helped create, name, structure, and build. It wasn't a business, it was everything, consuming every part of my emotion and subordinating the other things in life to its far-reaching vision. The grief cycle lasted a few months, questioned so many questions, and then I understood why I failed as a leader. You go on to talk about perspective and how this impacted you. Can you elaborate on that? Because up until this point, your career had really skyrocketed. You had been a notable leader. You're of course a leader today. And yet in this moment, you're really doubting yourself. And you even said that you failed, which, is very hard for a lot of people to even, say out loud. So can you share what you learned and where you came to identify this failure?
Sure. What an incredible experience that was. Still to this day, the greatest learning experience that I'll probably ever have in business. But it was a great strategy, backed by a lot of money and a great company, and arm in arm with some just great people. And so the narrative of building Rubicon Oilfield International was really, really exciting. And we basically had a jetpack to our back, and it was 4 or 5 years of just some radical, intense focus in putting that investment to work. And you're right. I mean, I subordinated everything in my life to that. But when it got to the stage where the performance of the company and in the market position at the time, it was the right phase where the founding team and certainly myself, it was the right thing to move on. Yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's tough emotionally. You go through a lot of kind of different phases of, what could have happened. And, when I say I failed as a leader, when you leave, it's so easy to make a whole bunch of excuses as to why things don't work out. But I think those that learn how to take extreme ownership, it may take a while, but eventually you just have to look in the mirror and say that, here are all of the things that you could have done better, as a leader, as a peer, and as someone who is responsible for, many, many, many people inside that enterprise. And so if it didn't reach to the performance and the results that you were expecting, it's because of no one else. It's because of you. And so it was great because I had this year-long hiatus, if you will, where it was just a profound journey in self-exploration, in finding ways in which I needed to improve as a leader, in ways in which I'm kind of redefined, that the things of the past didn't necessarily define me. What's ahead of me, is only going to be the things that matter. Defining what really makes me happy, which finding out the things of the past didn't necessarily make me happy, and so kind of resetting my purpose. And I think the journey for people's purpose is a tough, rigorous and laborious thing, and so I think I found what that purpose is, and that allowed me to kind of make the next decisions going forward. But looking back at that Rubicon experience, amazing people, amazing learning. Harvard Business Review could put a case study together of what we went through, in the amount of complexity, the amount of acquisitions, the amount of consolidation, the amount of just business challenges that we had to solve. And I'm forever grateful for that experience. Despite what it looks like today, that business still survives under a larger, very successful business today that is well led, and I know it'll be successful in the future.
How incredible. I think, like you mentioned, going through something like that is worth way more than going to go get like 3 MBAs.
Oh,
it was like, that's awesome. Also, we expect blogger on your title on your LinkedIn after this, because we had no idea.
I have no idea why I even started doing that. I think there's just a whole bunch of things rattling in my brain, and if one person around the world gets benefit from it, then that's good enough for me.
Awesome. I'm sure a lot of people would benefit out of it. So let's talk about building Rubicon. Tons of stress. It sounds cool to get, hundreds of millions of dollars of investment, but that also comes with a lot of stress, sleepless nights, because at the end of the day, you have to deliver and you have to pay back all of this money, and the business needs to do extremely well for all of the shareholders. That's a stress that I think maybe most people will never feel in life unless you're trying to build a business in this kind of magnitude. I know when we first spoke to you, you mentioned that those were probably like some of the hardest years of your life. And also because it took away from family, from your wife, from your two daughters. Something that looking back, like you mentioned, it was the best thing that has built you to become who you are today in your leadership style, in your business style, but also that you realize what were the things that mattered in life. And, during that hiatus, you looked at, what really is what Jayme cares about. And it's maybe not a lot of what went through in those 4 years. Can you talk to us a little about what that was like? And then moving forward, you decided to make a commitment to your family and to yourself that maybe you weren't going to choose to do that ever again.
Yeah. It was I mean, I certainly have the scars to prove it. And I know a lot of my ex-teammates do as well. There was just a lot of heart and, emotion and passion putting into making something successful. And that's not unique at all to the thousands of people that are probably watching this podcast that have gone through the same thing. Anything that, you really lean forward and commit to doing well, you want to do well, especially if people's livelihoods are at stake, within a company. And so, at the end of that experience, there was a lot of things that were sacrificed, like many of us have. And so when that journey was over, it was time to really level set and say, what are the things that make me happy? And, working, 60, 70-hour, weeks and flying around the world as a badge of honor, and, not being able to see some pretty memorable experiences for my kids are not the things that make me happy. Mm-hmm. But, you still have to, if you have it within you and you're still competitive and you still want to lead, then, how do you find that blend? Because, people talk about work-life balance. There's really no such thing, in this crazy new world that we live in. Mm-hmm. It's really a blend. It's a work-life blend. You don't have to enjoy everything, but you have to find the joy in everything. So, the blend between work and the personal life, what I believe, there's let's just say there's a philosopher and a philosophy that I believe in. And it's an equation, and it's called P times E times S3. And that may be a bit obscure, but the P stands for purpose. And I think that the journey for me to be able to find purpose allows people to have more sustained motivation in what they're doing. So we, as working professionals, the late nights that we work, the times in which we're not home because we're with, colleagues or customers, the times in which we're on flights in which we'd rather be at baseball games, if as long as your purpose is with intent, and as long as it's clear, it'll keep that motivation going. And the other one is E, which is, energy. You can't fulfill others with an empty glass. And if you look at the last couple of years in this chaotic pandemic, for us as leaders, we haven't just become tired, we've become deplenished. And we often take for granted just how deplenished we are as people, both at home and at work. Because when you're tired, you can take a nap. Mm-hmm. But when you're deplenished, you truly need rejuvenation. And that's a radically different thing for people. And so that E for energy is, we've got to be able to find the adequate amount of time to do the things that give us energy, whether it's being with our family, whether it's doing our hobbies more often, whether it's working out or just focusing on our health. That area of energy, we cannot lead effectively, and we can't be great parents or spouses without energy. And then last is that S3, which is kind of small, simple steps. And, when you think about sustained motivation, It's not about setting the flag in the horizon with this unattainable big vision of all the things you want to do. It's about getting 1% better every day. And it's little bitty things that are so attainable and so achievable that it's almost impossible not to achieve them. And as long as you get those micro things going every day, that's what progress is. And I think if you have purpose, if you focus on having energy, and if your goals are really set in very, very small blocks and small pieces, that's how you can create a work-life blend that allows you to appreciate all the stress that is, upon us every day. So.
No, I think
I
that's.
just went on a rant right there.
No, that was the best part of
Did
it.
my eyes roll back in my head? I don't know.
That would, what really resonated, and Massiel would totally agree with this. And this is one thing her and I've implemented. Once you have children, it's like all of a sudden your time becomes like really valuable. So you have to start realizing, like, is that meeting or is that lunch or is that breakfast really worth my time? And how much time am I going to waste driving to it, sitting in it and leaving it? And does that fulfill me? And does that fulfill my purpose? So I think children really play a big role in finding out really what your passions are and what your drivers are, because you really start to look at your daily life and how can you spend more time with them, but yet still have the impact and still follow the goals and dreams that you have. So I'm really happy that you shared that with us. Jumping back into kind of some of the things that you had mentioned before, and when you spent that time at Rubicon and that year off and you committed to yourself, I'm never going to do this again. I'm not going to get involved in something like this. And then bam, you jump into Varel Energy Solutions, which ends up becoming backed by a private equity group. And all of a sudden it's starting to look a lot like a similar experience. What made you make this decision and why?
Well, I mean, clearly, despite what I'm telling you, one of the attributes about me is I have zero self-control. So yeah, I mean, during that time, I did make a commitment to myself that, and my family, that, my life trajectory was going to be outside of energy. And it certainly was not going to be dedicating, my life to being an executive inside the oil field. And all of a sudden here I am. And I think, it goes back to, my purpose, though I never really took time to define it earlier in my career, was so much more self-absorbed. It was, what do I need to do to put myself in a great career situation? What do I need to do to put my family in a great financial situation? What are the things about me that I need to do? And I think during that year after Rubicon, it was much more intent driven about, impacting and influencing others. So, much more of my time and energy towards my family and my children, much more time, giving and sharing the things that I've learned to others, whether it be in mentorship or coaching or just friendships. And so that purpose now defined as much more, it's about, people and relationships versus what I'm trying to achieve. I saw Varel, Derek Nixon, who's the CEO, we had known each other just by being some competitors. And of course, people just know each other through industry. And, we started talking about the narrative of where Varel wanted to take the business. And even though it sounds radically similar to my previous life, it has so many unique differences in terms of the approach, in terms of the people involved, the culture, the investments, and how the philosophy of the investors saw the view of the world. And it just made sense. And so those conversations eventually evolved into, okay, if I can take, what I've learned while still wanting to learn and come into the business and help the business achieve its long-term mission, and I get to work around some pretty amazing people, then why not? So, another leap of faith, and most of my leaps of faith have been driven by people versus, the chase or the dream of something else. And so, thus far, it's been a great decision.
That's awesome. We actually had Derek on the podcast. So if you're listening, go look for Derek's episode, the CEO of Varel. And I can just imagine him, giving you a call, and he would be someone that would be very hard to say no to, with his, accent from overseas in Scotland. And he was an incredible guest, and he was so good at his leadership skills as well. So I can see why you were like, okay, where do I sign? I'm going to jump back into this. So tell us a little bit more about Varel and maybe some interesting things that none of the listeners know about, or what's unique about Varel on your ESG strategies.
Sure. So Varel Energy Solutions, though a company that's been in the industry for over 7 decades, really known as a independent manufacturer of drill bits around the oil field, both in the oil field and mining sectors. The business today is really brand new. So the thesis around 2020, when Varel was divested from its original parent company, it was acquired by a private equity called Blue Water out of London, as well as a private wealth investor, one of the original founders of Varel. Originally just kind of put the business together to say, look, let's build a unique, globally integrated manufacturing business, rebrand it, bring in some new leadership, some new fresh eyes in terms of what the future horizon could be like. And let's really just build it around servicing the customer with a pretty unique business experience. And what has always been kind of a drill bit manufacturing business has really turned its trajectory to serving the oil field as a manufacturer. So no longer really high emphasis on building products and selling products, but now just seeing the need for manufacturing consolidation around the world, seeing the capacity constraints of a global supply chain pandemic, and being able to take the really strong global footprint and expertise as a manufacturer, now starting to build products for competitors, now starting to build products for unconventional customers. And so, pivoting into really being a value creator as a supply chain manufacturer versus just out there competing with products has really served the business extremely well over the last few years. And again, that was kind of one of my motivators to come over, is it needed a new growth trajectory. This was a possibility. And so since then, there's been a lot of risk taking, a lot of great investment, and a lot of good decisions that's put us in a position where now there's a lot of upside to the business.
That's awesome. No, I think it was definitely a great decision. And also we'd like to say we're very happy that Varel's also a big supporter of the podcast, but also the initiatives that we put forth when it comes to ESG and, just being more diverse in general. And Varel is definitely there. And we see it also all over your social media. So thank you all for being a supporter. But lastly, what we'd like to end on, and I think we might have pulled this from your blog as well, which we liked. It was high performers don't do what they do so they can fly to Aspen on a Gulfstream or drive around Berlin in a Bugatti. I don't know, that sounds kind of fun.
That sounds kind of cool.
Yeah, most of them, the best ones anyways, do what they do because they're lit up by a mission they care about deeply. What is that mission for you, Jayme?
I think it goes back to, that purpose that was redefined, over the last 3 or 4 years is, to live life through, loyalty, gratitude, and impacting others. And so, for me, it's really about making sure that I'm dedicating much more of my time, my experience, and my love towards others. And most of my life and my career has not been that. So it's been really uplifting and fulfilling. But yeah, those that are able to define what the purpose is, you can see the world through a whole new lens. And I'm just lucky enough to have those experiences to be able to do that. And I'll tell you, I think the ability to help sponsor and support this podcast on behalf of Varel, the pleasure is all on our side. You guys have been able to do so many amazing things. We're really leaning forward with ESG initiatives as a real core commitment, especially to diversity and inclusion, a number of internal initiatives to make sure that we are really being a leader in that space. And so a lot of things that we believe that we're aligned with in terms of flipping the barrel. So ladies, I mean, continue to, blaze your trail. We are more than just honored to be able to help support you, and, really appreciate the conversation.
Thank you so
Thank you
much,
so much.
Jamie. We had such a wonderful time having you on the podcast. And just to let you know, after your pre-interview, I mean, we were like freaking out, not only because you were a pro baseball player and you're on a baseball card when I Googled you, but you were just, you have this aura of you of just like, I can tell that you're a leader within 10 minutes. And yeah, we're so grateful that you came on the podcast, and thank you for sharing your story, and keep doing what you're doing. Thank you again.
We're going to link your blog too. So when you go to his episode, we're going to have his blog on there.
Oh my goodness.
It's so funny because every time we say your blog, I could tell that you're like, why did I write that blog? And why is it still on?
And a part of me is just like, what did I write in some earlier blogs? Like, I need
It might be deleted by the time we post this, but it was.
Well, this is a reminder that whatever you put on the internet will stay on the internet.
No doubt. And you remember when oil got below zero, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's probably similar to what my baseball card is worth. So I wouldn't put too much emphasis behind that. So
Thank you, Jamie.
Thanks,
Thank you for your
Jamie.
time.
it's my pleasure, ladies. You're awesome. We'll talk.